Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us for our webinar today, Rebuilding Your Tourism Economy with Data-Driven Decisions. My name is Joe Dembski, and I'm moderating this IMPLAN webinar today. Before we begin, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. You may post a question at any point during the presentation today using the chat box on your screen. Additionally, the presentation is being recorded, so you'll have the ability to go back and review the presentation after the fact. You will hear today from my IMPLAN colleague, Devin Swindoll, our VP of Customer Operations. We're also pleased to be joined by Rob Miller, the VP of Public Sector Sales at Buxton. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll discuss how tourism is a driving force in economies of all sizes, how the coronavirus pandemic has affected tourism in 2020, and what insight is available to inform strategies to bolster your tourism industries in 2021 and beyond. We'll also take time to address attendee questions and provide an offer for all attendees to jumpstart their tourism efforts. So without further ado, I want to start with you, Devin. What are the ways that tourism is a driving force in the U.S. economy?
Thanks, Joe. The U.S. Travel Association compiles facts and figures for tourism and travel. According to their statistics from 2019, leisure travelers spent $792 billion, including $259 billion, on food, service, and lodging. Travel and tourism supports 9 million direct jobs in the U.S. In total, 15.8 million jobs are supported by the travel industry. This includes the indirect and induced employment, which was calculated using IMPLAN. Joe, these are large numbers for the U.S., but travel and tourism is very important for communities of all sizes who are looking at bringing in outside dollars to help support their local businesses. So let's take a look at an example of a massive tourist destination, Key West, Florida, which is located in Monroe County. When evaluating the importance of travel and tourism to a region and developing economic development strategies, it's important to understand how these industries support the local economy and setting a baseline to understand how the economy has shifted over the past year. For this example, we chose to set a baseline using accommodations, food service, and amusement industries. These include hotels, restaurants, casinos, bars, concert venues, parks, arcades, and other attractions. This can be a bit conservative as it is leaving out items like air travel and retail, but you can also look at annual visitors and occupancy rates to get benchmarks. But the benefit of this approach is that this data is available quarterly, and with the rapidly changing economy, it's important to get this information as it becomes available. So as you can see, 23% of Monroe County's employment is in the hospitality industries, and that's 14% more than the share in the U.S. But if we take this a step farther and look at the economic contribution of these industries within the county, these numbers were calculated using IMPLAN. IMPLAN is the economic impact modeling application, and it produces regional data sets for all zip codes, counties, and states in the U.S. to provide estimates like employment that you see here, our direct impact of 14,000 employees in the hospitality industries. But we want to know how these industries interact and support that local economy. And what IMPLAN does is it calculates the indirect effects, which are the business-to-business expenditures, and the induced effects, which capture the household spending in the region as the result of workers collecting wages. And it calculates the full economic impact or that ripple effect due to a shock in the local economy. So we see the 14,000 employees in the hospitality industries in Monroe County supported a total of 17,000 employees in 2019. You see about $1.9 billion in terms of output. Output is relative to sales or production value of industries in that region. And then you also see the importance that hospitality industries provide to county, municipal, and also state taxes. We could also dig into what other industries and occupations are most supported by the indirect and induced spending that results from the tourism industry. So as you can see, real estate is obviously very high in terms of indirect impacts. That's the result of those hotels, restaurants renting from the real estate industry. But you can also see it in terms of occupations. And so you see retail salesperson, nurses, and even accountants are impacted greatly by the hospitality industries within Monroe County. Now, Rob, we know how much money was spent in these industries, how many jobs they had in the past in Monroe County and Key West. But this money just doesn't appear out of anywhere. How do we determine where the spending is coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, with the numbers you just shared, Devin, I mean, uh, tourism in most markets across the United States has a huge impact on industries, on employment, both indirectly and directly. And those dollars that are flooding in and benefiting the community, they're coming from people. And in many cases, much different types of people, different types of households then reside within a destination, within their market. Our specialty here at Buxton is people and profiling people specifically. We're a consumer intelligence technology company that puts our clients in position to leverage data to identify opportunities for growth in their market. Now, in the tourism space, it's understanding who visits your market, where they come from, and how you can attract more to go out and increase hotel occupancy, duration of stay, and spend while visitors are in your market. Those are typically the key objectives that we hear from speaking with folks across the country. Now, today, there's some really exciting new data sets that can help understand in virtual real time what's happening in your market from a visitation standpoint. So today, Devin, really excited to walk through a combination of a couple of these different data sets in two pretty diverse markets. So the first one, you know, as you've gone through some information on Key West, you know, Key West is very well known. You know, it's a tourist destination that certainly the expectation is that it draws folks from a fairly large area across the country. I mean, who wouldn't want to be relaxing in Key West, listening to some Jimmy Buffett and, you know, drinking a margarita? So the map that we're looking at here on the screen is a geofence that we have created around a key area of attractions in Key West. So for the analysis that we're going to share with you all here in a moment, we're using mobile GPS data to understand who visited Key West during the calendar year of 2019, where they came from, what types of households they represent, and to ensure that we're only profiling visitors, we've placed a 100-mile exclusion zone around Key West. So what that means is any device that has a home location within 100 miles of Key West is not going to be part of this analysis. Now, when we take a look at just the map, the draw of visitors to Key West back in 2019, I mean, Devin, we see people coming from all across the United States. So, you know, now that we've got this map up on the screen, each of those green dots represents the home location of a visitor who showed up in that central business area of Key West. So, you know, not surprisingly, we see a ton of density up in the Northeast, in the Midwest. You know, winters are cold up in Chicago and New York and, you know, Philadelphia. So, you know, Key West is a pretty attractive destination. And looking further at some of the information I was able to pull, we actually saw the highest volumes of devices in 2019 showed up around New Year's and late January, early February. Now, getting more into the data, we were curious to find out, you know, beyond just that map, what specific markets represented the top 10 from a visitation standpoint for Key West back in 2019. You know, Miami, Fort Lauderdale was the top one, Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg, but at number 3, we saw New York City. You know, other non-Florida markets in the top 10 were Philadelphia, Chicago, Atlanta, and Washington, D.C. So this starts to kind of set the stage for us back in 2019, you know, a visual representation of where people were coming from that went to Key West and what some of those specific markets that had high percentages of visitation. Now, it's really interesting to look at that type of information. We've confirmed there was a lot of people that visited Key West back in 2019, but we don't really know who made up those visitors, just where they came from. So next, I want to take a look at, you know, the customer profiles, the visitor profiles of people that we observed in Key West back in 2019. And this is really where information becomes actionable in the fact that we can now start to really drill in and understand some opportunities that these types of individuals present. How do our visitors live their lives? How do they spend their money? What types of amenities are they looking for while they're in market? By leveraging mobile GPS data, unique devices can be captured in Key West and followed all the way back to the longitude and latitude where they reside. Getting down that far allows providers to append back this information to a household profile. Here at Buxton, we maintain a file of over 126 million households across the country that's updated every 4 weeks. So this allows us to really drill into the who. So let's get into these profiles. For Key West, roughly 20% of their visitors in 2019 came from the 4 segments that you see on the screen. These are mainly composed of affluent boomer-aged households and our A category, which is generally referred to as the power elite. So we've got our C11s, our A01s, our C13s, and our A02s. Now, these household profiles, they provide traditional metrics like age, household income, and presence of children in the household. So for instance, the C11s, they're 51 to 65 years old, most likely to earn between $125,000 and $150,000 per year, and do not have children present in the household. But it also allows us to get deeper and more detailed and understand that those C11s, they mostly live in cities and closed-in suburbs. They're finally at an age where they're ready to enjoy the fruits of their labor, and they prefer domestic travel for vacation. When they shop, they actually shop despite being at the upper ends from an income standpoint. They do shop in high-end retail, but they're also not opposed to shopping in discount clubs. And their discretionary household spend on an annual basis is typically between $26,000 and $32,000 a year. So a destination like Key West, it draws visitors from a really diverse area of the country. As that map shows, but more than 20% of its visitors come from 4 similar segments: older, affluent households. It's a beach destination. It attracts people that are looking for warm weather, clear water. Now, not every destination that relies on tourism is going to be like Key West. Actually, Devin, the bulk of markets are nothing like Key West. Many smaller markets and communities still absolutely rely on tourism, but a little bit different type of tourism. So whether it's somebody visiting a downtown to shop on a weekend, or an annual festival, or potentially a youth sporting complex, these markets draw on a diverse visitor that provides, still absolutely provides a huge opportunity for that market.
Thanks for that, Rob. And so Devin, we kind of teed you up there. So what about, can you tell us about these less vacation-centric places for tourism?
Yeah, absolutely. As Rob said, clear water and warm weather, that's my cup of tea. But there's a lot of areas that are really reliant on visitors from outside of the region, whether they're a beach town or they're landlocked, right? And those tourism annually facilitate spending entering the economy from outside the region. Rob, what are some other items that you see that aren't really your classic vacation destinations? I know you mentioned some of them. What other types are there that are out there?
Yeah, Devin, college campuses, actually. They obviously bring in students that are there seasonally, but also they bring in parents for Mother's Day weekend, or Father's Day weekend, or homecoming. We actually see, and it might not even be a typical tourist, but people coming in to utilize various healthcare amenities that are in county seats. So there's a lot of different reasons that a non-resident can end up in your market. And it's important to have that understanding so that you can understand the impact that they have and work towards capturing more spend and providing better amenities for those folks.
And there's several ways that you could really measure that. Obviously we've talked about the number of annual visitors, occupancy rates, number of hotel nights booked within the region, but some of those can be costly. Another way to look at this is an objective measure that measures the economic importance of hospitality industries is the location quotient. So location quotients compare the relative concentration in a specific area to the concentration in the US. And they're mainly used for descriptive and comparative purposes for analyzing industrial or employment concentration. So let's look at some counties in Texas with total employment of greater than 10,000. These are not necessarily your typical major tourist destinations that we'd think of, but here you see the 2019 hospitality industry employment and also location quotient for those industries. And these values come from IMPLAN study area data. So to give you an example of how to interpret this data, you see Galveston County has a location quotient of 1.4. This means that the hospitality industry is 1.4 times more concentrated in Galveston than it is in the US. You see Bexar County is where San Antonio is located. You may expect that to be higher with the hospitality industries, but that location quotient may be a little bit lower because they do have a larger, more diversified economy than some of the less urbanized areas in the state. But one that caught my attention, especially with some things that are going on recently here, Rob, is McLennan County. So I did some searching and saw that Baylor is located there, and people traveling for sports and other events at colleges really fit that idea of tourism, as you mentioned before. So let's check out go ahead, Rob.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, absolutely, Baylor's front and center for a lot of folks with them just recently winning the NCAA championship.
Absolutely. So let's look at the economic contribution of those industries, the hospitality industries in McLennan County, Texas. So we selected McLennan County because Waco is located in the county. And we do have overall values, the total economic impact contribution of these industries compared to Monroe County are a little bit lower, but they're still really important to the tax base, as well as the total employment within the county. And if we look at the detailed industry and occupations that are being impacted, you see some similarities here as industries purchase similar items, even if they're located in different regions. So no matter what, hotels and restaurants need to rent real estate, right? But you also notice banks and insurance surface on the industry impacts, and software developers surface on the occupation impacts, because those items are in demand in Monroe and McLennan counties, but McLennan has the supply. So we're capturing more of that spend in those industries or occupations within that region. So this information can be helpful for you looking to build coalitions with other industry groups that rely on the hospitality industries in your region. But Rob, yes, there's Baylor there. You're in Texas. I've only ever visited once. I can't imagine Baylor is the only thing driving outside visitors supporting this industry. What else is bringing people to Waco?
Yeah, you know, first and foremost, I mean, Waco is in a critical corridor of I-35 that connects the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area to Austin and further south, San Antonio. So just, you know, there's a lot of traffic that is commuting on that interstate. But Waco's actually seen a tremendous amount of development over the past decade or so, and they've, you know, really put a focus on improving downtown and, you know, providing some really great amenities there. So it's, you know, certainly a growing market here in Texas. You know, so, and I think what we want to do is get to our next example here. So what we've done is now, we know that you know, Waco, whether you followed Baylor winning the national championships, or you know Waco from maybe it's Chip and Joanna Gaines from Fixer Upper, we actually decided to study Magnolia Market at the Silos, which is Chip and Joanna Gaines, you know, home decor and lifestyle goods store. So we thought this would be really interesting to look at and just get an idea of, you know, what type of draw that the Silos was seeing back in 2019. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at what that map looks like for 2019. You know, I know, Devin, when we originally began talking about the potential of looking at Magnolia Market at the Silos, both of us were actually surprised when we looked at the data. I mean, I didn't expect it to have such a large national draw. I mean, that little geofence in the heart of Waco there's people that are coming from all across the United States. Now, of course, when I shared this with my wife, she said, of course it is. That place is extremely popular. It's a completely different type of destination than Key West, but it still does have that national draw. And this presents a huge opportunity for Waco. I mean, they're drawing thousands of visitors off of a major interstate, and they're bringing them into downtown Waco. An interesting piece of this is looking at, beyond just that volume or draw, is again looking at those visitor profiles to really hone in on that opportunity that's presented to Waco. Our two boomer age segments that we talked about before, our C11s and our C13s, they've resurfaced as dominant visitor types. But we've also seen the B07 and F22 households come into that top 4 list of profiles. F22s are particularly interesting. They're active, young, upper established suburban couples and families living upwardly mobile lifestyles. So they're a little bit younger, 31 to 35 years old, $100,000 to $125,000 from an income standpoint. Some have children present in the household, but others do not. So when focusing in on those F22s, it might be on that family vacation, come to Magnolia Market, or when you go to Magnolia Market with the kids, come to downtown Waco. Those households also, they're tech savvy, they're football fans, and they live active lifestyles. So understanding this type of information, this profile, and the opportunity it presents is going to be an important step, especially when we look forward and understand how things have potentially changed as we move forward and evaluate 2020 and potentially look at how to go out and use data to recover from a visitation standpoint.
Thanks for that, Rob. So with that, we got the baseline value of tourism established, but you have to address kind of the elephant in the room, is that things changed drastically in 2020. So let's take a look then at how COVID-19 affected travel.
So once again, Joe, the U.S. Travel Association is providing this data, and they report on the losses experienced by the travel and tourism industry. So as you see here, in the United States, leisure travel spending decreased by 30%, domestic travel spending decreased by 36%, and actually output tied to that travel decreased by 42%. And we see this really borne out in terms of the employment figures as well. So these values came from IMPLAN's 2019, Q2 2020, and Q3 2020 data sets. So you see the nationwide employment decreased from 2019 to 2020 Q2 about 10.5%. But that decrease in travel and those hospitality industries were really much more impacted at negative 37% decrease. Monroe had a larger hit, perhaps due to the increased reliability of travel and the economy as a whole, but it has started to recover with strong gains in Q3. McLennan is close to recouping that total employment loss in these industries, but it didn't have quite as hard of a hit as Monroe did in Q2. So what's driving the different employment changes by region? Maybe that has to do with the type of visitors and those behaviors that have changed. Rob, what do these numbers look like compared to the 2019 data?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at it, we've got that familiar map from 2019, and I think we all understand that, when we shift into 2020, that things are definitely going to change, but I think it does vary in some regards by market. So let's take a look at what that 2020 map looks like. So what we've done is we've run the same study area, and we're looking at that same snapshot. And right off the bat, I mean, even if we flip back to 2019 and then pop it back to 2020 one more time, just the draw has changed, and that's a direct result of the pandemic. It's a direct result of public health and economic conditions changing. People aren't flying. A destination like Key West, they're all of those destinations that were in the top 10 back in 2019, they are relying on traveling on an airplane, and a lot of folks were just not willing to travel that far back in even if we're looking Q3 and Q4 of 2020. So certainly the draw has changed. That list of top 10 destinations, New York has slipped down the list, and it's actually been replaced by all markets within Florida. So we've got Miami, Fort Lauderdale, we've got Tampa, St. Petersburg, we've got Orlando, West Palm Beach, Fort Myers. People were driving. So not as big of a volume, not as big of a draw. The other item that's of interest is, did the type of people observed in Key West change from 2019 to 2020? And interestingly, they did not. The top 4 visitor profiles observed in 2019 and 2020 stayed consistent. What did change is the point of origin people were willing to come from. So that's going to be an important trend to monitor moving forward. And I'd actually be really interested to pull some of this data down and look at the last month or two, which would certainly bring in some spring break numbers for Key West in 2020. But it's interesting to me that, and actually very valuable to know that the types of people didn't change. So we don't need to change our amenities. We don't need to change awareness campaigns. We might want to just factor in the different points of origin that people are coming from.
So Rob, I've got a question for you that's coming from the audience. The circles on these slides, what are the numbers in that represent?
Yeah, so the circles in those slides it's indexing. It is explaining to us how the propensity of that type of household to come into the destination that we're looking at. So we're going to look at all of the households that fall. This takes into account that certain segments represent a smaller portion of all households across the country. So this actually factors in that maybe there's less AO1s across the country, but they over-index to be a visitor, and that's absolutely the type of household that you want to focus in from a marketing standpoint, or just incorporate into your strategy as you think about the types of amenities that are in market. But that's a really good question to have.
Yeah, thanks for addressing that. So I will tell you, I think it's fascinating to see that even with the loss of just number of travelers and where they're coming from, that the visitor profiles in Key West didn't really change. So I'm interested to see if the same thing held true when you're looking at Magnolia Market.
Yeah, and Joe, it's actually, thinking about it, all 4 of those segments, they are older households. So you'd think that potentially the public health aspect of it, may have prevented those houses from going out to Key West, but certainly, does not look like it was the type of destination that was really affected from that aspect. Now, Magnolia Market. Let's go ahead, and we've got that familiar 2019 origination. Let's take a look at that 2020. And even more dramatically than Key West, I mean, we see a dramatic decrease in the draw and the volume of people that came into Waco, into Magnolia Market at the silos. For this type of destination, it may be part of a larger trip, where visitors are, pulling off the highway to come visit, and they just weren't taking those trips like they did back in 2019. Now, what is important to understand the impact of this change is understanding the profile of visitors. So one thing that we see in destinations that are similar to Magnolia Market, similar to Waco, is that they draw in different types of households that are actually present in market. So what we've done is we're looking at those top 4 visitor segments to Magnolia Market, and we're actually looking to see what they represent in terms of percentage of households in Waco. And looking at this and isolating that BO7 category, I mean, those households are virtually non-existent in the Waco market, but they're coming in. They're one of the most dominant segments that represented visitation to Magnolia Market. And that's big. I mean, these BO7s, they're flourishing couples and multi-generational families living a wide range of lifestyles in the suburbs. So they're older, 51 to 65. They're affluent, 125 to 150,000 dollars per year. They've got kids, 13 to 18. What's the impact of having those households no longer coming in the market? Are we going to see those same households return and come back in 2021? And that'll certainly be an important question for the folks over in Waco to get a grasp on. And for that matter, just any destination to be able to understand, how have things changed from a consumer profile standpoint as we move forward and we continue to, recover as best as possible.
So it's interesting that being positioned as a family destination, those families are then crucial to the tourism market there. What do you think about this, Devin? What's the overall economic impact?
Yeah, so even with signs of recovery in Q3 2020, there are notable losses in both Monroe and McLennan County as a result of the decrease in these hospitality industries. So you see the decrease in the state and municipal taxes. And just to note, this Q3 data is annualized, so you can compare those. You see Monroe actually stayed a bit more constant in terms of the taxes, even though they did take a bit of a harder hit in terms of the employment than McLennan did. But as Rob was saying, access may be another primary factor that's really driving this differences in employment decrease there. Key West is really reliant on air and cruise travel, while McLennan, as Rob said, it seems some items could have been shifted, and that could be a day trip or a weekend visit trip that you're driving to. But either way, all these industries are impacted, and it's important to know your economy has shifted in the past year, knowing your visitors, where they're coming from, and informing the community on the impacts they have.
Thanks for that, Devin. So, unsurprisingly, losses felt by the tourism industry are really pretty massive. But now we're getting to the point, how do we move forward? What insight based off, what you knew before and understanding 2020 can inform your recovery strategies?
Yeah, so to start with, let's look at what the U.S. Travel Association is saying in terms of the forecast that travel will begin to see this year. And so you see that it does begin growing in 2021 and continues to grow in 2022, but it won't return to pre-pandemic levels immediately, but it will slowly build to get to that point. Leisure travel is anticipated to realize that grows sooner than business travel. So you actually see the number of leisure travel domestic trips meeting the 2019 trips in 2022, though the spending will be slightly less. So maybe people are taking more trips, but not spending quite as much as they would have if it was the economy as it was in 2019.
Well, that's a positive thing. So then what are some actions that we can now take to boost the recovery of your tourism economy?
Yeah. So first and foremost, use data to guide economic development initiatives. And ways to do that are to understand how your economy has shifted in the past year, what we looked at, see the baseline, how it's shifted, and how these visitors have changed, so you can know how you have to adapt to those visitors. You can also identify opportunities to engage these visitors more and increase that spend, but it's important to evaluate the options that you do have, because you can't do it all. You can't do all the initiatives that you want to. So you need to be smart by evaluating those options to match your priorities with economic development and inform your stakeholders so the community will be bought in with a direction and understand that ripple effect your actions have on everyone living within the region. Rob, what do you see as some of the highlights going forward?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Devin. I think having the information to be honest with yourself, or actually maybe not even be honest, to remove speculation as to where you've been, what's happening now, and use that to help inform decisions on how do you get to where you want to be. So absolutely, maximizing and focusing in on ways to increase hotel stays, like you said, and increasing duration and spend while on a trip. Other areas that some people might not necessarily think of right off the top of their head is using this type of information to empower, other organizations or local businesses in town. So maybe it's a downtown development group or a chamber of commerce, being able to help them understand, setting the stage with what are the financials, what's the impact, that the potential that's out there, and giving them some actionable insights into how to tweak amenities, and provide a really good environment to capitalize on opportunities. And when I started looking at the Magnolia example and realized that it had such a draw and such volume pre-pandemic, I thought, with what I knew of all the focus in Waco and downtown, that's an opportunity for them. So I actually dove a little bit deeper, and I ran an analysis looking at kind of cross visitation between downtown Waco and Magnolia Market. We actually saw that only 8% of the observed devices showed up in both of those two study areas. So much the same as I drew a geofence around Magnolia Market at the silos, I did that in the central kind of downtown area of Waco. We actually see, looking at volume, in 70% more volume at Magnolia Market than downtown Waco when we strictly look at visitors. So that presents a huge opportunity. There's all these people coming into Magnolia Market, which is close in the downtown area of Waco, to go out and understand, how do we get these people to come into downtown? Is it something that we need to do from an awareness standpoint to let these individuals know that, hey, we've got some really great amenities, we've got more shopping, more dining in downtown? Or is it potentially that we need to tweak the actual amenities themselves to cater more to those folks that are coming in from Magnolia Market? So absolutely a huge opportunity to use data to continue to grow, and not just grow, but really thrive as we move forward.
A way to evaluate some of these initiatives, it's about 1.6 million visitors are estimated to visit Magnolia Market each year. And it has been noted that some of those visitors may be stopping, as you mentioned, it's on a primary corridor. They may just be stopping for a couple hours while traveling to another location, just because of their interest in Chip and Joanna Gaines. So if that downtown area can realize a small percentage of those visitors through some of the options that you provided above, Rob, what could be the impact if we increase overnight visitors by 25,000 people annually? And I used some previous visitor spending data to run that economic impact of if we did capture those 25,000 visitors. And you see it brings a pretty significant impact, positive impact into the community.
Thanks, Devin. So we talked there about capturing visitors that are coming through and being able to increase their stay, or get them to take advantage of other things in the region. Rob, how could you go about maybe trying to increase visitors to your entire region and not just capitalizing on the existing visitors that are there?
Yeah, absolutely. And Joe, it truly does start with studying kind of who you are, who has come, what the amenities that you have available, who does that resonate with? And what I have here is I have a map of the top destination back in 2020, which is the Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg area. And all those green dots that you see on the map, those are actual visitors that showed up in Key West in 2020. So what we want to do is we want to identify, where are all the other people that look like these visitors, that look like those top 4 segments, those C's and those A's. So what I've done is I've actually populated our next slide here with a visual of all of those purple dots. And all of those purple dots represent only the households that fall into that C11, C13, A01, and A03 household type. Now, looking just holistically at this market, there's over 2 million people that live in this area, over 1 million households. Those purple dots represent 99,000 households that are just in those top 4 segments. So going out and maximizing our dollars from a marketing standpoint is what I would recommend doing. whether you're going down and actually getting as targeted to only focusing on those 99,000 households out of the over a million, or you want to identify zip codes that have a high penetration of the visitors that you're looking for and advertise at the zip code level because it is cheaper on a per impression basis. So, there are ways to use this type of data to actually go out and provide awareness and be very targeted and really maximize the budget that you have.
And so with those figures, what we can do is look at the effects of bringing in an additional 5% of visitors from the Tampa Bay region can do. And so again, using previous visitor spend data, I just ran a what if scenario if we were able to capture 5%, average stay of about 3 days, and the total economic that has. You see the 98 employment, 11 million in terms of output, about a half a million in county and municipal tax, and then you see the significant impact to state taxes as well. But you could run some what if scenarios as well to maximize that budget, because the budget getting 5% of households to Tampa Bay may be different or similar to trying to get some of those weekend visitors from Miami that we saw a large increase from in 2020. But those Miami visitors may not be staying as long as those Tampa Bay visitors are. So the impacts that your scenarios could have could be different impacts on the economy. That's really what Rob said. Use this information to inform and make smart decisions to be able to maximize that budget for your economy.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Rob and Devin. So that we'll take a second here to go over the takeaways from our discussion today, but I want to remind everyone that if you have any questions, please enter those in the chat box on your screen, and we're about to address those at the conclusion of the presentation. But first, I want to turn back to you all, Rob and Devin, and I want to ask you all, what should the audience take away from this webinar today?
Yeah, so tourism can be an economic boom for localities of all sizes, whether they're traditional vacation regions or not. And the COVID-19 pandemic wreaked havoc on the hospitality industry, but things are trending positively. But it's important to note and inform your local stakeholders where your economy was, how it shifted, and the potential impact your strategies have going forward. Now, this information can be very important to get the community bought in, to support your initiatives, and showing the return in terms of jobs and taxes as a result of your actions.
Yeah, and I think from my end, we all know that there's a huge economic impact in tourism. There's also a lot of uncertainty about what things look like moving forward, what 2020 looked like. So, my key takeaway is that there is data out there to help remove risk, to remove uncertainty, and really put communities, tourism organizations in a great position to go out and have a quantitative, a data-driven story to put at the center of their strategy.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thanks, Devin. So we want to enable you all to take the first steps to revitalizing your tourism economy. And so to that end, both IMPLAN and Buxton have special offers to extend to our attendees today. So Rob, if you would like to talk about what Buxton can do for you first.
Yeah, we're very excited to have been part of the webinar today, and very appreciative of everybody that joined us. So we would like to extend a complimentary Mobilytics report, which is what I use to pull the information on Key West and Magnolia Market at the Silos. So all you have to do is click on the link, and we'd be happy to get one of those reports run for you.
And IMPLAN would love to provide a 20-minute project walkthrough to all attendees today. So during that walkthrough, we will talk specifically about your region, show you step by step how to get running an impact analysis for tourism or a tourist event in your region. To sign up, email events@implan.com.
Thank you, gentlemen. Those sound like excellent offers. I would encourage everyone in attendance to take advantage of those. And so with that, we've gotten a ton of great questions, so we'll jump right into the Q&A. And the first thing I want to start with is a question that actually each of you all can address. Specifically references the IMPLAN data sets, but I think it works for both of you all. So can COVID Q2 and Q3 data be compared even with the tourism industry having kind of seasonal impact, or would you only want to compare those annually? So Devin, if you want to talk specifically about those data sets, and then Rob, if you want to talk about maybe just the granularity of what you can look at with Buxton's data there.
Yeah, that is a great question. So the Q2 and Q3 data that we have, they are annualized and they are coming from the same data sources and data methodology. But it is important to note some of those quarterly data sets and the data available to estimate the more timely data sets. You can compare them to 2019, but just understand the methodologies that are different in the data sets available.
And on my end, I absolutely think it would be critical to make that type of comparison. The data set that we use for our Mobalytics report is actually updated every single day, and it has a recent, so it's got a lag time of about 48 hours for us to collect it and make it usable to our clients. So absolutely, I mean, it's something that you'd want to be able to come in and, potentially even look at Q1 of 2021 to include in your analysis of what's happening on the ground.
Excellent, thank you all. Devin, how can you use IMPLAN to actually quantify how many jobs are created through a specified tourism recovery strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way that I did that and the way that users can do that as well is, a lot of regions already have some type of visitor spending profile of previous visitors to the region, but those may have shifted. But what you need to start out with is that visitor spending profile or assumption of that visitor spending profile and how many visitors you get coming to your region for that specific event or throughout the course of your campaign that you're running. So if you estimate the average spending and how many visitors are coming, you could get those direct impacts to say, hey, $1 million is being spent at local hotels, restaurants are being spent $500,000. And those are the inputs you need to put into IMPLAN to estimate out those jobs and tax impacts through the events or the strategies.
Thanks, Devin. Here's another one that is applicable to both of you all. So it specifies how can the information from IMPLAN drill down into small towns or regions, or does it only look at large cities or MSAs? And so to you, Robin, actually, I'll start with you. Let's talk about another one there, the granularity of how small of a location you're able to look at with the Buxton data in this case.
Yeah, Joe, so we're actually able to look down at extremely small geographies. Good example on the private side of our business where we work with retail and restaurant providers. Frequently, this type of data is actually used to look at drive-through lines. So if you're a quick serve chicken restaurant and you want to peer into your competition's drive-through line, you can go ahead and just draw a geofence. So very small areas, and it's available across the entire United States.
And our data sets are available at the zip code, county, and state levels.
Thank you all. So we are we've got an overwhelming number of questions, and we're pretty much up against our time today. So if you didn't get your question answered, we ask that you do continue to send those in, and we will make sure that they're addressed and that come in the next few days. But if you're unable to get your questions answered in the chat box, you can also reach out to us at support@implan.com, and we'll happily address those questions. I just want to take another moment to say thank you to Rob and Devin for presenting here today, and I want to thank all of you all for your time and attention. I'll also say to keep an eye out for an email with the recording of today's presentation and for more information about these offers from IMPLAN and Buxton. And as always, you can contact us with any questions at support.implan.com. So once again, Devin, Rob, I want to thank you all for your time here today.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Rob.